Good afternoon, ladies, gentlemen, all my MB friends. You are tuned to Sacred Voices on KGNU. This is Metro Arts. My name is Aston. I serve on the board of directors for Sacred Voices. Sacred Voices is a Denver-based organization that teaches poetry essentials to the local youths of the Denver area. We also host an open mic once per month. We have previously been hosting these on the fourth Friday of every month, but we have now adjusted back to our old classic time slot of the second Friday of every month. This is at 6:30 p.m. We are partnering now with Denver Community Media, which is in the Buell Public Media Center, the same place where KGNU's Denver station is. This upcoming open mic, it'll be happening today, August 13th, and it will be virtual if you join us on our Facebook page at Sacred Voices Denver. Speaking of which, I have the feature of that show with me here today. I have Karia White. How are you doing, Karia?
I'm doing so good. How are you doing?
I'm doing just fine. And so you are preparing for a featuring role at this month's open mic. You've been there a couple times to perform. How are you approaching it, if you are approaching it any differently as far as being a featured performer rather than just having, a tinier time slot?
Yeah, I think features are always a little bit more difficult for me just because I have to fill the time. So I think I have a little bit more anecdotes that are going to fill up some of the poetry that I don't always get to talk about with shorter time slots. Just riffing a little bit. I have a lot of poems that I can share. I think for featuring, I always like to just feel out the audience and give people options for like what they want to hear. If it's a heavy day, maybe we'll read some like love poems. If not, maybe we'll do some heavy hitting stuff. But I'm really excited to perform tonight, and I think it's going to be a good one.
I think so too. And you certainly have no shortage of heavy hitting poems, I know. You've been featured on this show, the KGNU show, a few times before, and you've had poems ranging from, racial issues to food insecurity, eating disorders, things like that, and just a wide array of topics, and that's kind of reflected in your overall work as well. Can you give us just a quick rundown of all of the different things you are doing currently?
Yeah. So I always like to say that first and foremost, I'm a student, not just in, the academic sense, but I'm a student of life. And so those are the things that I like to attach to my body first. And so, while I'm like studying up at CU Boulder, I'm also like a poet, but I also do a lot of things out in the community. Some things that are really close to my heart right now are working with the Denver Freedom School. We're on a brief hiatus right now, but we're excited to come back. That works to cultivate political education in the city of Denver. And, Zoom kind of allows us to branch out. So we've had, people tune in from, across the nation, I would say. That's one of the projects that I work on. I'm also spearheading the Boulder Community Fridge Project, which is in really close collaboration with the Denver Community Fridge Project, which is essentially just another way to battle food insecurity and is an abolitionist project. And says that we take care of us. We don't necessarily need all of the state's apparatuses, which are already failing to take care of our community, because we have the tools, we have the necessities to, give back to the community. And so I'm really excited to be alongside that team. What else am I doing? I know I'm doing a lot of different things. I also run a book club. It's called Books for the Block. Which also goes hand in hand with political education. I just love education. I think it's a really cool way to get informed about like a lot of the poetry that I share, a lot of the history that I get to share, and whose history gets to be told. Those are some of the things that I'm working on right now.
Yeah, it sounds like you're a very busy person. So let's start at CU Boulder and work outwards from there. So one of the things I know you're doing is Shades of Honey, which I believe is an open mic at CU Boulder. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Shades of Honey is my baby. It's Donovan Bright and I's baby. So in 2019, we kind of noticed the lack of space, place, and voice for students, specifically students of color, Black, Brown, and Indigenous students. In the realm of artistry, there was no container to kind of hold all of that expression. And so Donovan Bright and I, who is another student, or used to be a student at the university, we came together as two poets and we're like, all right, let's make it happen. Which is what I love so much about my community is we don't talk about it, we just be about it. So I think that is really, really cool. But yeah, we host an open mic and it centers Black, Brown, and Indigenous people, but anyone is welcome to perform. We just ask that you respect the space and that priority is kind of given. So we call it like a progressive stack. And yeah, people can come share their words. We have an open mic coming up on August 27th, which is going to be in collaboration with Union Hall Denver and Summer Taylor and Shemai Madding, who are amazing facilitators. They're amazing educators. They're amazing photographers and artists. And they kind of gave me the space to come in with Shades of Honey and open it up around the theme of anger. So I really invite everyone to go look at that. It's called They Rage, and the exhibit is actually under a broader term, Matter is Minimum. And it's at Union Hall Denver. So we'll be there August 27th from 6:30 to 9. And Bianca McCann is hosting. Susie Q. Smith will be in the house. Bree Hill will be in the house. Ruth Woldemichael. All my favorite poets are going to be there. I'll be spitting some stuff. It's going to be dope. So
that sounds like a great time. We encourage everybody to go find out more information about that. So expanding outwards from there, you mentioned this word a few times in the descriptions of some of the things you're doing, abolition, and you've described yourself as an abolitionist. Could you give a brief description of what that is for people who don't know?
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways that people kind of conceptualize abolition. I think something that I mentioned a little bit earlier was that we don't trust and we don't believe that the state is going to take care of us, and that our community networks, our community structures need to be built in a way that can sustain us, that is life-giving and not, life-taking. And so abolition for me is creating those vacuums, creating those containers in which we can take better care of each other. And we do that in a way by divesting funds. We do that in a way by abolishing, which is, essentially the root of that word, abolishing the police, abolishing systems that no longer serve us, abolishing paradigms that are regressive, abolishing the ways in which our interpersonal relationships are not life-giving. And so, yeah, I think in a nutshell, that's what abolition means to me. And there's a lot of different projects that you can take on underneath the umbrella of abolition. But I think as long as you are centering community, a lot of different things can be conceptualized as abolition.
Yes, and I think for a lot of people, it's viewed as a rather a scary concept or a scary type of political person, an abolitionist. It's kind of analogous to the way the Black Panthers were in that, really like you had a free breakfast program, but people see it as, something that is far from what it actually is. One of the things that pops to mind for the abolitionists, the mutual aid aspect. I know that you had a mutual aid fair this summer. Could you describe that a little bit?
Yeah, so it wasn't just me. I had a great team that came together. I actually had to go out of town for a funeral, and some of my really close community members stepped in and led that event in my absence. So I want to give credit to them. But the Pride Mutual Aid Fair was mutual aid on display. I mean, we had all of these different ways that, community came together. We were giving out clothes. We were giving out political education. So there was a table with zines, and a couple of people that were on the education committee came up with like these QR codes in which people could find out more information about, safe and radical sex education. What else did they do? The AIDS epidemic and all of the things in which we don't learn in school. And then there was another flip side to mutual aid, which I think often gets left out, which was just providing people with joy, providing people with that radical reclamation of space and emotional spatial wellness is really what we were talking about during that mutual aid fair. And pulling on the long legacy of like Stonewall, just all of the incredible activists, Black trans women, Black queer women that led that movement. And coupling that with mutual aid, I think was really, really important for us. But I think the thing that stuck out to me the most in the Pride Mutual Aid event was getting people to reimagine what we're actually talking about when we say care about people, right? Because I think oftentimes mutual aid is denoted to charity. Mutual aid is denoted to giving things away that you yourself wouldn't even want. And so changing your paradigm, changing the ways in which you think about who you're actually in community with, who is your neighbor, is a really great way to get to the root of what mutual aid should be about. And the thing that I loved about the mutual aid fair was we were providing artistic lenses. Cut and Paste Colorado, which was there and did a whole collage making aspect. And then there was an open mic that Sacred Voices helped us put on. Bree Hill hosted that. There was music and all of these ways in which we say that, or we don't even give thought to the fact that houseless people or unhoused relatives don't have access to even the menial, the mundane things that we take for granted. I can, flip on Spotify right now. I can go on YouTube and watch, slam poetry for the next 3 hours if I wanted to. But there's ways that that's not readily available for our unhoused neighbors. And I think that was my biggest and most prideful moment of the Pride Mutual Aid Fair while I was out of town, just seeing all of the videos flood in and people really engaging in the ways in which mutual aid is supposed to happen. Mutual aid is supposed to be accessible for our disabled relatives. Mutual aid is supposed to be joyful. It's supposed to be safe. There's not supposed to be cops at Pride, which we saw a lot of, that entire week. I think that there was an altercation that happened on Colfax that day, and there was a clash with the police. So mutual aid is supposed to be safe. And if we're talking about abolition, we need to create those environments that don't allow for police presence to be, even a thing that we have to worry about interfacing with. And I'll say here, one of my very best friends, Sky Roosevelt Morris, tells me, if you want to be free, you have to act free. And so you have to create those environments in which certain things are a non-factor. And I will always prioritize the safety of our community. I will always prioritize the critical analysis that just needs to be brought back into organizing. So yeah, that was one of the events that we had in June.
Yeah, and that sounds really great. I think it just seeing an example of that in the community, it helps people who don't really understand or have a conception of what these things would look like. It allows them to see the way forward in that aspect. And one of the things that you touched on, the education aspect of that, I imagine that one of the things that people don't understand the most when it comes to abolitionists is police abolition. And what does that look like? And, people get scared by that term. Could you maybe make it a little less frightening for them?
I don't know if I could make it less frightening. I think when you're brought up in a certain way, I think any kind of change is going to be scary. And so I always tell my students that I teach at North High School, I'm like, my job is not to make anything palatable for you. I'm just supposed to be a floodgate to the information, and what you do from there is on you. And I think we all have to be agents in our own education. We all have to take up the mantle of educating ourselves. But to answer your question, I think prison abolition for me is abolishing the prison industrial complex where Black people, brown people, Indigenous people are disproportionately affected. America makes up 25% of the world's population in prisons. That's actually insane when we think about how many countries, how many nations, how many sovereign nations there are. We make up 25% of that. And if we break it down even further, Black people are, highly represented in that percentage. And so if we're saying that prisons, which has a whole long history in slave patrol, has a whole long history in night watch, and the ways in which Black and brown people were brought back into captivity, were brought back into this very oppressive, brutal system, then I can't say that anything that blossoms from those roots is going to be fruitful. The roots are rotten. And as Angela Davis says, radical simply means grabbing things at the root. So if we're trying to reimagine these worlds, we got to get creative. And I think prison abolition really opens up the door for what that means. What does it mean for us to take care of each other? What does it mean for us to have more comprehensive mental health services for people, more comprehensive how do I want to say this? More comprehensive sex education, access to trans and queer healthcare, and things that are, quote unquote outlawed right now that are make people susceptible to going into those pipelines. So prison abolition takes on the role of abolishing the school to prison pipeline. It takes on the role of establishing trans and queer healthcare. It takes on the role of, mental health services and all of these other facets that kind of get swept by the wayside, and makes it easy for institutions to come into neighborhoods and take out entire sectors. There's a poem that I really love, and it talks about there's this woman walking, and she goes into this neighborhood, a Black neighborhood, and she says that there are no adult Black men anywhere in sight. And I think that really speaks to what we're talking about with the abolition movement. What we're talking about specifically with the prison industrial complex is it goes in and removes an entire sector, destabilizes entire communities, and shovels them into a system that doesn't have any rehabilitative properties at all. And so I think that the prison abolition movement really calls for us to get creative. And something that my friend Brianna Shaw reminds me is that if you want to get free, if we want this liberation that we're so desperately trying to talk about in all of these open mics, all of these seminars and conferences that we go to, we're going to have to get creative. And honestly, if I can just be frank, colonization, oppressive systems did not happen gently. And it actually happened quite violently. And so if we're going to reverse all of that, I can't say that our liberation is going to be gentle either. And so the prison abolition movement really pushes us to see the ways in which different possibilities are opened up, and the avenues for those community outreach, those community centers of care can be materialized.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense in terms of the colonization aspect and all of that. One of the other things that comes to mind for me when it comes to abolition of the prison industrial complex is just that little bit of the 13th Amendment, the supposed abolition of slavery amendment, where those little those little few words, except as punishment for a crime. That's really a big aspect of the whole prison population there. It's basically just slave labor. So abolishing that would truly mean the abolition of slavery in this country 150 years later. But anyway, let's move on a bit more. So let's talk about Black August a little bit. Can you talk to me a bit about that?
Yeah. So how do I want to speak about Black August? Black August is something that I just got hip to not too long ago, so I don't pretend to know everything. I'm still learning. I'm still a student of life, so I'm still learning about Black August. But essentially, my understanding of Black August is it's a way to commemorate the fallen freedom fighters and the political prisoners of the Black liberation movement. And so Black August calls for us to have more centered and more concrete and concerted efforts around political education and the oppressive systems of U.S. prisons, and recommitting ourselves to the discipline of liberation that so many freedom fighters have sacrificed their lives for. And something that I love about Black August, Jesus, so many L's, is it centers, I don't want to say it centers, but it really highlights George Jackson. And George Jackson is this person who, I believe in 1964, he was imprisoned. He was 19 years old when he was imprisoned, and it was for armed robbery for $70 at a gas station. And he was sentenced to a prison term of 1 year to life. And, I think in most cases that would break a lot of people, but that's not the case in George Jackson's case. It ignited a political fire in him, and it ignited a revolution within him and caused him to write an entire book. And so one of his seminal texts that informs a lot of this other work that we're talking about with prison abolition, what we're talking about with direct action, and just political education in general, is Blood in My Eye by George Jackson. And it goes into all of the ways in which we have to be better about our liberation. We have to be smarter. We have to come together, what it means to actually take up this mantle of being an agent of liberation, what it means to be a vanguard of a revolution. And so, yeah, I love Black August. It really recommits me to the work that I do in the Denver Freedom School. It really recommits me to my own education as somebody who's about to graduate in the winter. And yeah, that's Black August.
Thank you for that. Anyways, let's keep moving on and talk about more of your projects that also are falling under this abolitionist umbrella. The Community Fridge Project you mentioned earlier. Could you talk a little more about that?
Yeah, I really love the Community Fridge Project. We actually just dropped our first fridge off in Boulder maybe 2 weeks ago. So it's set for opening. We have to go up and paint it and everything. But it's kind of been a project for Boulder, at least, that's been in the works for the past year. I have a team from Boulder that's been helping kind of, get all of that situated. But we also have to give our nods to Denver Community Fridge, Zoya, Eli, AJ, all of their people, Linda, who have kind of like guided us in this way. I remember having the idea one morning. I was like, I think that we should do a community fridge, because that's something that's huge on the East Coast. Being from New Jersey, being, in close proximity to New York, those are projects that have always kind of existed. Mutual aid has always existed in the Black community. And so I was like, why does Colorado not have something like that? And I remember waking up and all of a sudden somebody's like, oh, I heard about like the community fridge. I think somebody was already working on that. So I actually got in touch with Eli, who is the founder of Denver Community Fridges, who does amazing, amazing work. I just love them so very much. But I was like, how do we make this happen like across Colorado? How do we bridge this to the Boulder, scene? And essentially what I love so much about the Community Fridge Project is that abolitionist framework and that community-centered framework where people drop off food, just out of the goodness of your heart. Like, you're not looking for any nods. You're not looking for a tax write-off from a 501c3. You're not looking for any kind of donations or charity, essentially. You don't need to know people's story, which is something that I'm seeing personally in the mutual aid community. Is we think that we're entitled to people's stories. We think that we're entitled to their pain and their trauma that allowed them, or force them really to be in these precarious situations. And we're not entitled to that information from anybody. We should just help people. We should aid them in the reclamation of their space. Our jobs as humans, at least for me, my job is to reclaim my own humanity. And then once I do that, and am in the process of doing that, my job is to help somebody else reclaim their humanity. And so humanity doesn't ask questions. Humanity, holds people accountable. It provides barriers, but it doesn't close space. It opens up dialogue. It doesn't close off discussions, because discussions and dialogue are very different. Power dynamics there, which we don't utilize in mutual aid, but it opens up that dialogue for what can we do in community. So the Community Fridge Project really just allows people to combat food insecurity. You come, you take as much as you need, you leave what you can. There's, safe Narcan kits that are there sometimes. Contraceptives are something that we always like to give out. That's the Fridge Project, essentially.
Great, yeah. So a lot of what I'm hearing, it's a lot of great projects that you're doing, and I imagine that a lot of people will ask you, like, how to get involved. What is it that I can do? Because, when you think of mutual aid, you think, something you do, something I do. So what is the entry point for somebody to get involved with something?
Yeah, I actually this is like one of my favorite questions to be asked. I got asked this the other day, and they were like, how did you get involved with doing these things? And I had responded and said, I asked myself the most basic questions that I could ask myself at the time. And one of those things was, whose story do I want to tell? How can I make room for that story? And what ways can I materially make a difference in my community? And I think to anyone that wants to embark on mutual aid projects or abolitionist projects, those are the questions that you should ask. And those are the things that should inform where you go and who you want to be in community with. I love to say I'm not in community with everyone. I love my community, and my community, my love requires. And so if you want to be in community with me, like, there are some things that you have to come ready with. And you have to earn it. I think that that's like essentially what we're talking about with community wellness is the individual has to be well before they come into community and offer the community anything. So I would say really get right within yourself, get right with your spiritual practice. If that is, at all feels in alignment to you, get right with the people that are around you and start asking those questions to yourself. But in the meantime, if you need people to like help you with that, I'm always around. Like, my Instagram's like always up. I'm always floating. And I'm always looking for people to mentor, I think, because I know I'm not going to be around forever. I know that I'm not going to be, it's actually a very egocentric thing to think that we're going to be the sole people that fix all of the problems in the world. And that's just not true. And so I'm always looking for people to mentor, but I would ask for people to like have those questions ready and really know what you can contribute to a movement, really know what your strengths are. Just ask the question, I think, is how you get involved.
I guess that leads into a question of it, thinking of in terms of mutual aid. We've talked about like big events or big programs that happen, but mutual aid can happen in more of an everyday sense as well. How would that take place?
I love Miriam Kaba. I hope I'm quoting this correctly, but Miriam Kaba talks about abolition starting at home. And so I think the smaller projects that you can take on are really just asking for consent in your community. Like, what does the community need? Go talk to your unhoused neighbors. Go say good morning, like buy somebody a bagel. And that opens up a whole gateway of community that you weren't privy to before. I think consent is a really big aspect of mutual aid that kind of gets swept by the wayside and people don't like to talk to. Because again, our egos get in the way. And that's when charity kind of swoops in and says, oh, I know what the community needs. I know what people need. And the fact of the matter is you can't speak to anybody that you have, or speak for anybody that you haven't spoken to. And so I encourage people to open up the dialogue, to have the conversations with people in their communities, get consent, ask the questions of what people need, and then organize from there. And Assata Shakur, I'm name dropping a lot in this, but I don't do anything by myself. I think Assata Shakur says it best: organize wherever you are. You don't need to be in the hub of Cap Hill. You don't need to be, anywhere but where you are right now. And do what you can with what you have. And I'm sure the community will welcome you with open arms.
That makes a lot of sense. And we're running out of time here, but I wanted to thank you very much for coming by. You were going to be the featured performer at our open mic, which is happening tonight at 6:30 p.m. Join us on our Facebook page. That is Sacred Voices. I believe it's facebook.com/Sacred Voices Denver. If you'd like to watch, if you would like to perform, because it is an open mic, just send us a message and we will get you on stage as well. Once again, my name is Aston. I am on the board of directors for Sacred Voices. And we have been talking with Karia White. Why don't you take the last few seconds here to tell people where they can find you? Where are you on Instagram? If you have a website, ways people can contact you, etc.
Yeah. So my name's Karia White. You guys can find me on Instagram. That's the easiest way to message me, at IAMKARIA. So I am Karia on Instagram. And then everything in my bio is kind of linked that I do. And I look forward to seeing everyone out in the community. I look forward to seeing everybody tonight. And I look forward to connecting with you tonight. So yeah, come say hi.
All right. Once again, Karia White, thank you very much. And I will see you all next time.